The Indian Wells scoreboard still exists somewhere in a WTA database. 6-2, 6-love. 90 minutes of a teenager getting systematically dismantled by a ball striker who simply refused to miss. That's the version of this rivalry most people remember. That's the version sitting in every preview, every stat sheet, every casual fan's gut instinct about Saturday. And it's the exact reason what's about to happen at the Rot-Weiss Tennis Club in Berlin carries so much weight, because Alexandra Eala isn't walking into that semifinal as the same player who got run off the court in the desert. She's walking in as someone who just took Elina Svitolina apart on grass, a surface where craft and touch matter more than raw power, a surface that rewards exactly the kind of game Eala plays. And on the other side of the net stands Linda Noskova, fresh off a 6-1 demolition of Paula Badosa, looking every bit as dangerous as she did in March. This is not a rematch. This is a confrontation. Let's talk about what actually happened at Indian Wells first, because context matters more than the scoreline alone. Noskova came into that match reading Eala like an open book. Every serve placement, every shot tendency, every pattern Eala had shown in previous rounds, Noskova had scouted it, absorbed it, and turned it into a blueprint for destruction. The Czech's flat, early-time ground strokes took time away before Eala could even set her feet. On a hard court, with the ball skidding through fast and low, there was nowhere to hide. Eala never found rhythm. She never found range on her forehand. And by the time the second set rolled around, she looked like a fighter who'd already lost the fight mentally before the physical part had even finished. 6-love isn't just a scoreline. It's a full surrender of momentum, and everyone who watched it knew exactly what they were seeing. But tennis has a funny way of resetting itself when the surface changes. Grass is a different sport wearing the same rulebook. The bounce is lower, the points are shorter, and the margin for error shrinks to almost nothing. Players who rely purely on pace and rhythm, the exact identity Noskova leaned on in the desert, can suddenly find themselves rushed, uncomfortable, forced into decisions they didn't want to make. Players like Eala, whose game is built on early contact, sharp angles, and a competitive stubbornness that borders on defiance, tend to come alive on this surface. And that's precisely what we saw against Svitolina. Eala didn't just win that match, she controlled it. She dictated the terms, stepped inside the baseline, took the ball on the rise, and refused to let a former top-5 player settle into any kind of comfort zone. It was one of the cleanest, most composed performances of her season, and it came at exactly the right moment to set up this semifinal. Now here's where the head-to-head gets interesting, because it isn't 0-1 in Noskova's favor. It's 1-1. Eala has already beaten this player once. She knows what it feels like to stand across the net from Noskova and come out on top. That memory matters. Confidence in tennis isn't abstract. It's built from specific, lived experience, and Eala has real evidence in her own history that this matchup isn't unwinnable. The desert loss doesn't erase that. It complicates it. It adds tension to a rivalry that's already split right down the middle, and it means neither player walks into Saturday with a clean psychological advantage. Noskova has the recent statement win in her memory. Eala has the surface, the form, and a prior head-to-head victory in hers. Let's get into Noskova's game for a second, because underestimating her would be a mistake. She hits the ball as flat and as early as almost anyone on tour her age. Her return of serve is genuinely elite. She steps in, takes time away, and turns defense into offense within a single shot. Against Badosa, that ball striking was on full display. Badosa, a player who can be dangerous when she's dictating with her own forehand, never got the chance to. Noskova took the racket out of her hands from the very first game and never let up. That's a dangerous sign heading into a semifinal against a lighter-framed, more finesse-oriented opponent. Because if Noskova gets into that same rhythm against Eala, the Filipino star could find herself in trouble fast, especially early in the first set before she's had time to adjust to the pace. But here's the thing about Eala that doesn't show up cleanly in a stat sheet: her ability to problem-solve mid-match. She's shown, repeatedly, that when Plan A stops working, she has a Plan B ready, and sometimes a Plan C. Against Svitolina, when the veteran tried to slow the point down and draw errors, Eala adjusted her footwork, shortened her swing, and started taking the ball earlier to deny Svitolina that rhythm entirely. That kind of tactical maturity, especially from someone still building a resume against the tour's elite, is rare. If she brings that same adaptability into the semifinal, if she can absorb Noskova's early pace and redirect it rather than trying to out-hit her, this match becomes a genuine coin flip rather than a rerun of Indian Wells. There's also the emotional dimension here that can't be ignored. 6-love losses leave a mark. Every player who's been on the wrong end of one carries some version of that memory into the next meeting, whether they admit it publicly or not. The question is what Eala does with that memory. Does it live in her head as a warning, a source of hesitation on big points? Or does it live as fuel, as proof that she needs to be sharper, more decisive, more aggressive from the very first point? Everything about her run through this tournament, the composure against Svitolina, the willingness to take risks at the right moments, suggests it's the latter. She looks like a player who's used that defeat as material rather than baggage. Weather and conditions in Bowlin will also play a role that's easy to overlook. Grass courts respond differently depending on moisture, temperature, and how much play has already worn down the surface by the time the semifinals roll around. A slicker, faster court favors Noskova's flat, aggressive style. A slightly slower, grippier surface gives Eala more time to set up her angles and use her variety. Neither player controls that variable, but it could easily tip a tight match one direction or the other, and it's the kind of small detail that rarely gets discussed until after the fact, when everyone's trying to explain why the match went the way it did. So where does that leave us heading into Saturday? Two players who've split their only two meetings. One who's fresh off a statement win over a former top 5 talent on the exact surface that suits her instincts. Another who's playing with terrifying efficiency and has recent, vivid proof that she can dismantle Eala's game entirely. The desert loss will get mentioned in every commentary booth before the first ball is struck, and it's a real result, a real data point, a real warning sign. But it's not the whole story anymore. Eala at Indian Wells and Eala on bowling grass are two different competitors facing two very different sets of circumstances, and pretending otherwise ignores everything that's happened since March. My genuine read is that this comes down to the first 4 or 5 games. If Noskova gets an early break, gets into that same flat, early timing rhythm that buried Eala in California, this could tilt fast and stay tilted. But if Eala holds serve comfortably out of the gate, settles her feet, and starts redirecting that pace the way she did against Svitolina, this has the makings of a genuine battle. Maybe even a signature win for a player who's clearly building towards something bigger than a single tournament run. The 6-love nightmare isn't erased by wishful thinking. It gets erased, if it gets erased at all, by exactly the kind of performance Eala has shown she's capable of this week. Saturday will tell us which version of this rivalry is the real one.